like that. You look like that when you are dead. A wee, a woo. The woman to the parson said, anyway, that was taught to me by my mother. She learned it in Girl Scouts. And she was quite a Girl Scouter most of her life. And I can't get this. She had a troop when I was 4 and they were 13. And I thought they were all amazingly wonderful princesses. Little do we know about 13-year-olds at the age of 4. But I thought it was sort of wild in a way for some of the images it provoked. So I looked it up searched for it on Zoom by looking up a woman to the graveyard went, and the worms crawled in, the worms crawled out, the worms played pinochle on her snout, which I felt, if they don't remember anything, that part would be. And actually, that's from 2 different songs, English songs. One of them is definitely from England. It's all about the hearse, or whatever you would take the carcass around. And I think that's where the worms going in and out came from. But it's an interesting story, and it was the one that my mother had was quite different, and I guess acceptable to sitting around the campfire at night when you're out camping and with your other Girl Scouts and getting a little scared and huddling together, that sort of thing. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie Shiva. I think you set
You're welcome.
the tone for tonight. I heard a version where the tune is like, the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the hair is turning to sauerkraut.
Oh my gosh.
My mother taught me that. And that's from, I don't know where she got it from, but she grew up in Missouri. So I don't know. There were some other verses that were similar too, but the tune was different. So that's really interesting.
Well, my mom was born in 1910, so 1920, she would have been 10 years old, so forth and so on.
She had the more original version, I think. Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Brandon, I hate to bother you, but I am having problems getting that screen for participants to disappear. Do you know?
Just click participants again.
I tried. Not doing anything.
Huh.
It's not muting either, so sorry.
Let's see if I can mute you.
Can you take me off from being a host?
Yes. There we go. I withdrew your host privilege.
All right, let's see if I can get it to do it. Come on. Oh, well. Okay, I'll just keep messing with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Genevieve, thank you for reminding me to press record. So the recording will kind of have joined Ellie Shiva's story mid-verse. And once again, this is the October Do Tell Story Swap. Welcome to everybody. We just had a wonderful kickoff with Ellie Shiva's creepy ballad. And next on our list, we have Beth. And so let me find Beth. There you are. Please welcome to the Do Tell stage, Beth Wakely.
Sorry, Mom, I can't get it.
Hi, Beth. I'm always surprised to see my face looking back at me. But anyway, I'm used to seeing my audience of young people. And this is an oldie but goodie. Once there was, and twice there wasn't, a family with 3 brothers. Big one in the middle and teeny tiny. And together every day they would play in the sunshine in the middle of the village. But the forest was just past the fence. And their granny said, don't ever go out into the forest. In the middle, there lives a witchy woman. Well, it was summertime and the leaves were beautiful and the berries were at their peak. And Big One said, let's go out in the forest and gather some berries. In the middle was ready to do that, but Teeny Tiny said, well, wait, remember what our grandmother said. Oh, Teeny Tiny, you're just afraid because you're so small. No, I'm not, he thought, but he followed on, but thought inside, I'll keep my eyes open and my feet ready to run. And they did enjoy their day out in the forest. They played hide and seek. They had such a wonderful time with those berries. The juice was dripping down their chin, all over them. They completely lost track of the time, and the shadows grew long, and they could not find the path back to the village. Teeny Tiny climbed up a tree. He took a look around and said, oh, look, there's a light over there. Let's follow that light. Maybe someone can tell us the way home. And so they did, and they came to a clearing with a little house surrounded by a rickety white fence. Big One opened the gate, creak, and out on the porch of the little house came an old woman, and oh my, her nose curved down and her chin curved up. And she said, oh, you must be lost. Oh, little boys, you must be hungry. Come in and have dinner, and tomorrow I'll help you find your way home. Well, she opened the door and the aroma of her dinner came out. It was just too beckoning, and Big One walked right on up and she said, oh, good boy, you may call me Auntie. And he walked right in, and in the middle followed, and Teeny Tiny crept along behind. They sat down to a very tasty meal. In fact, they ate so much. Their eyes closed quickly and they were very sleepy, and each one got a own little bed. And she said, you just wait. Remember, tomorrow I'll show you the way home. Well, Big One in the middle were completely out just as soon as they touched that pillow. And Teeny Tiny kept his eyes kind of open. And when he knew that the old woman was cleaning off the dishes, he walked to the window and he looked out. The moon was full, shining on that fence. Was that a fence of wood? Oh no, it was a fence of bones, maybe little boy bones. He wasn't sure. He snuck back in the bed, and pretty soon the old woman called out, who is awake and who is asleep? Well, the big boys were asleep, but Teeny Tiny called out, the littlest one is awake. Oh, Teeny Tiny, what do you need to go to sleep? Well, at home I get popcorn and raisins to snack on. And so in some way she was able to get raisins and popcorn, and he took a little bite and ate that up, and it became very quiet. And she called out again, who is asleep and who is awake? The littlest one is awake, said Teeny Tiny. Oh, she was not happy this time. Teeny Tiny, what is it you need to get to sleep? Well, all that popcorn made me thirsty. At home, my mother goes out to the well with a sieve and brings me back water. Now, witchy women are not always as bright, and so as she was bending down to get a sieve, out of her pocket fell a little bar of soap and a little needle and a little tiny little dagger like a paring knife. Clip, clip. Oh no, my magic things. She reached up on a shelf and put them up there. They'll be safe here. And she went right out the back door with her sieve. And she may have tried for a long time to try to get water in that. Of course she couldn't. And Teeny Tiny woke up Big One, and in the middle, get up, this is the house my grandma warned us about. But wait, Big One, lift me up to that shelf. And she said those were magic, I don't know. He tucked them in his pocket, the 3 items, and the little boys, they ran. And if I had my class, we'd be tapping our knees really, really hard. So if you want to make running noises, you're welcome to. And they ran as fast as they could. But you know, the witchy woman had very, very long magical legs, and they reached out. And pretty soon he could hear her breath right behind him. And Teeny Tiny thought, oh, he reached in and he got out that bar of soap. This may not be magic, but maybe she'll trip. He dropped it down and it grew into a mountain of soap, as slippery and sliddery and soapy as could be. And she could not climb over that mountain. She could not. She had to run all the way around it. The boys got ahead, but not for long. Those long bony legs reached out, and they were so close behind Teeny Tiny. He could smell her breath coming closer, and he pulled out that little needle. It slipped right out of his hand, full of soap, of course. Boop, it hit the ground, and it grew into a mountain of needles. Sharp, stickery, prickery as could be. Ouch, ouch, oh, ouch. Well, she could not climb that mountain of needles, and she had to go all the way around. And the boys were running as fast as they could, breathing so deeply. But she came right up, and he could almost hear her apron flapping right behind him. And then he pulled out that little teeny tiny paring knife type dagger. And when he dropped it, hoping that it was going to be magic, it was. It creaked and it cracked, and it opened the earth into a canyon so deep she couldn't climb down, so wide she couldn't jump over it, and so long she couldn't go around. And so that old woman stood there, and the boys ran until they reached the gate into their village and closed it quickly, and heard way back behind them shrieking out, "Teeny Tiny, I'll get you next time." And may that next time never happen. The end.
Wow. Thank you, Beth. That was
Hard to
kind
hear.
of a, I wonder, now, where did you find that story?
It's all the way up.
You know, I have told that story for so many years, maybe 15 for kindergartners and all kinds of ages. It is not my written story, obviously, and it's kind of a combination. It's not really Bony Legs. It's not Baba Yaga.
Right.
I'm trying to think. I don't believe it was by Barbara Fisher, but it was definitely, you know, I'm telling it with a little bit of license and
Mhm.
not acknowledging exactly where I got it, but it's kind of a generic middle, not quite Middle Eastern, but
Mhm.
you know, certainly not a Hansel Gretel, certainly not
Right. Yeah.
more of a bony, more of a Yabba Baba.
Yeah, or bony legs. I like that. And I knew something was up when he asked for a sieve. Or
Yes, and you always have the element of three. I
yeah,
know, and then if I'm going to show it, I would bring a sieve, because that is an ancient word.
yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you so much. And we are definitely deep into the Halloween tradition tonight. Thank you. And so next on our list, we have Mary. Welcome to the Do Tell stage, Mary. Thank you.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. My story is also sort of Halloween-y, and it took place a long, long time ago in a place that was far away. There was a tulip tree that was growing on the shores of a big swamp, and under the tulip tree, there was a one-room shack. That's all you could say for it. That was the home of the laziest man in the country. So he would never do anything that he could get away with not doing. One late fall afternoon, he called his 3 dogs, who had strange names, You Know, I Know, and Come to Calico. And he took his dogs and his gun and went to see what he could shoot for his dinner. Somehow or other, everything seemed to have gone to bed for the winter. And finally, all he could shoot was a skinny old rabbit. So he took it home and he cooked it, and he ate the meat off the bones and put the bones back for the dogs. And then he sat beside his fire with a hatchet in his hand and one of the shingles off the roof, which he was cutting into slivers to feed the little fire that was all the heat in the house. And finally, he got sleepy and decided to go to bed, which meant that he pushed his chair down flat. And when he was not quite asleep, he heard a rattle in the dishes in the sink where he had put the bones. So he looked up, and there was some big black thing routing around in his dishes, looking for the bones, he was sure. So he picked up his hatchet, which was close by, and threw it at that black thing. And it let out a squall and jumped down and ran through the hole in the floor, which is the way he had gotten in. And what do you know, but the hatchet cut off the thing's tail. It was a long, beautiful, fat tail. And when the old man picked it up, he thought, this feels like it has quite a bit of meat on it. So he skinned it, and sure enough, he cooked it, and it was delicious. He didn't eat it quite all up, but he left some of it on the counter. And then he went back to bed and went to sleep. The next night, as he was eating the rest of the tail, he heard something out in the swamp. It said, "Taily-po, taily-po, all I want is my taily-po." And the sound came closer and closer to the cabin. So the old man called out, "You know, I know, Cantico Calico, get that thing out of here." And the three dogs went baying and barking and chased whatever it was far back into the swamp and came down to their bed under the porch of the shack. The next night, there was nothing to eat, and he was too lazy to get up and go hunting again. So he was laying there in his bed, thinking about how empty his stomach was, when he heard the voice again. "Taily-po, taily-po, all I want is my taily-po." And it got closer and closer to the cabin. And once again, the old man called the dogs. "You know, I know, come to Calico, get that thing out of here." And the dogs came boiling out from under their porch where they were sleeping. And in their hurry, they knocked the fence down. The old man was too lazy to pick it up. And they went off into the swamp chasing that thing. Well, the old man waited, but they didn't come back. And so he finally went to bed and fell asleep. And in the morning, he didn't realize that the dogs had not come back. That thing had led them so far into the swamp that they were lost. So the next night, the same thing happened again. He was thinking about how hungry he was, and he heard the voice. "Taily-po, taily-po, all I want is my taily-po." And it got closer and closer to the cabin. And the old man called, "You know, I know, Cantico Calico, get that thing out of here." But nothing happened. That thing had led the dogs so far into the swamp that they had not been able to find their way home. And so the voice got closer and closer to the cabin. "Taily-po, taily-po, all I want is my taily-po." So the old man jumped into his bed and he pulled the covers up over his head and hid his face in the pillow. But this voice kept on. And then he felt something at the bottom of the bed, and he peeked out, and there were two big black ears, pointy ears, sticking up. And then very soon after that, two red blood eyes sticking up. And he said, "I don't have your taily-po." And the thing said, "Yes, you do," and jumped right into the middle of them. And you never would believe what a commotion, a tearing, a ripping, a growling, a snarling that there was, until finally in the end it stopped. And there was no sign of the old man, and the shack was a shambles. So the voice said, "Now I've got my taily po." And the black thing went out through the hole in the floor. Well, nobody ever saw anything of the old man or the dogs after that. And eventually the shack fell down and the tulip tree shed its leaves over it. And now, if you should find that place, you wouldn't be able to see any hide nor hair of the whole thing. Oh, maybe if you kicked in the grass, you might find a bent nail or a rotten board. But the people in the village say that very late in the year, if you go to that tulip tree about that time of the night and you listen very hard, you'll hear taily po, now I've got my taily po. There you go.
That
One-
was
One Halloween
terrifying.
story.
That was really scary.
Yeah.
Spooky. Yeah. My goodness, Mary, where does that story come from?
My dear man, I have known that story for more years than you've been alive, and I have no idea where it originates.
Wow.
It's a folk tale of some sort.
Some kind of swamp creature like that. That's
Mhm,
quite
mhm.
frightening. I wonder, yeah. And there's something really awful about him eating the tail of the thing too.
I
Really,
know.
yeah. Wow. That was very scary. Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
That was wonderful and very well told. Thank you so much, Mary.
Oh, you're more than welcome. It's my pleasure.
Wow. We just keep getting scarier and scarier. Evelyn, do you promise not to get too dark
Right.
on it?
Hopefully this will lighten the
Lighten-
mood a little. My
Lighten
story.
things up a little bit.
Yeah.
So please welcome to the Do Tell graveyard, Evelyn.
Okay. Well, my story starts when I was 6 and had my first act of rebellion. So one morning, I'm in the kitchen eating my cereal. My mom comes in and says, "Oh, honey, you spilled sugar everywhere. You really got to clean that up because otherwise this kitchen's going to be filled with bugs." My mother forgot one little thing. I loved bugs. But what I had to do to enjoy my love of bugs was go outside, go look at leaves and get the caterpillars, or go dig in the holes for the roly-poly bugs. I even loved the snails, picking them off the leaves and watching them kind of shape shift, go into like close up and then expand again. So now here I just learned that sugar could bring these bugs into my kitchen. So I knew I couldn't just leave sugar around when my mom could see it. So the next morning I got up, I opened the kitchen window, and I spread sugar along the sill. And waited for the bugs to come in. My plan was this: if my mom complained, I'd say, "I don't know, look, there's no sugar on the table." But as much as I waited, those bugs never came. And to my mother's credit, later she figured out I loved bugs, and she didn't mind when I brought in jars with praying mantises in. She handled it when I surprised her one day with a cricket I caught and managed to get to chirp on my arm. But so my love of bugs pretty much stayed throughout my childhood, even though I always had to go outside to find them. But meanwhile, I kind of sort of forgot about these stories. But what happened was a couple of nights ago, I was watching a show by a man who wants to start a kind of backyard revolution. The reason why is because in the last 50 years, we have lost 45% of our insect population. And this may not be that upsetting to people like my mother, but it also impacts the birds. It turns out that a lot of birds feed their babies caterpillars. And what I've learned in this show is what has happened is by bringing in all these non-native species of plants, the insects like moths and butterflies, which turn out, much to my mother's misunderstanding, to be very, very picky eaters. They won't eat sugar. They won't even eat any old plant. They have to eat very specific plants. Some of them eat only one kind of plant. And so moths and butterflies, which make caterpillars, are in rapid decline. So what I learned on this show was that this man is trying to encourage people to have what he called our bug gardens, gardens with the native plants that moths or butterflies like to eat. So here I am now at the ripe old age of 63, back in the business of wanting to attract bugs in my life. Only this time, I won't have to do it sneaking behind my mother's back, and I won't be doing it with sugar on the windowsill. Thanks.
Wow, thank you, Evelyn. That was a story with a really important message. And what a nice unity it had to start out with your, your curiosity and innocent interest in these bugs, and then to have it come full circle to something that is very important and necessary. That was beautiful. I've never thought of having a bug garden. I know.
well, I'll invite you all over when you come.
I would really like to see that. I guess it could be really beautiful. Different colors and.
Well, it depends on. I forgot to. I loved caterpillars were my favorites when I was a kid, and that's that's what my bug garden will have. It'll have caterpillars. So.
A writhing, moving mass garden. Thank you, Evelyn. And next on our list, and I've been practicing saying your name, Lori Rium, like museum.
Right.
Rium, Lori Rium. And we will welcome Lori to the Do Tell stage. Lori Rium.
This story is about our family's quirky birthday celebrations. 1960s suburban kitchen, there's crisscrossed crepe paper across the walls. There's a homemade cake by mom. Everything's looking good. And the kid who has the birthday is standing there with all eyes on them, and the candle is lit up, and they make a wish and they, yay, they got all the candles out. Wonderful, their wish will come true. But wait, all of a sudden a candle lights itself again, and another one, and the kids trying to blow them out, and they keep coming on. They're those magic candles. Well, those were insistent little things. They would spark to life no matter how many times you tried to blow them out. And the kid would be hyperventilating at some point, and just almost near tears, because they just wanted to eat their cake, but no, they couldn't until all the candles were out. Then it came time to eat the cake. So I don't know where this came from. Our family had a rule that the birthday person got to start eating, and nobody else could start eating the cake until the birthday person did. So they would have fun with that, and they would fork up a piece of cake and open their mouth and pretend to eat it. And then just when you thought it was safe, they'd pull it back out. Because if you, the non-birthday person, ate the cake before the birthday person, your punishment was silence until everybody finished their cake. But worse than that, the birthday person, once they began eating, they had to remain silent till they were finished. And if they didn't, under the table they went.
Oh.
Huh.
So our family would, have all these opportunities to try to snag each other and catch each other doing something not quite right. And of course, Dad was a rule person. So it's like, sit up straight and elbows off the table and please and thank you. So my brother, Michael, poor Michael, he's like turning 8 or something. Mom serves him the cake. He starts to eat and Dad says, what do you say? And Michael's, thank you, under the table for Michael. Dad's like, aha, gotcha. So the poor kid's like on the hard floor, his party hat is askew and he's sitting there, forking up his cake. It seems so mean-spirited to me, but it was just part of our tradition.
Yeah.
I actually have photos of people as young as 5 or 6 under the table. I have a picture of Mom when she was in her 50s under the table as a birthday person. I even have a photo of my grandpa, who lived with us quite a bit, turning 84. And because he was kind of frail at this point, he was still seated in his chair, but my 2 brothers lifted the table above him. So he was basically under the table because the poor guy, I guess he must have spoken. You speak at all, you're under the table. Well, not everything was that punitive. The other thing our family did, which I really had fun with, like most families, we had one telephone in the house and it was in the kitchen on the wall. It had a long, long cord. And when our family had a friend or neighbor with a birthday, all of us kids and grandpa, our parents would gather around the phone and we'd hold it up, we'd dial up the person and we'd sing, happy birthday to you, in a very hearty way, not always in tune. And then we'd hang up. We never said who we were. We would just do these stealth calls. Well, as you know, as Brandon so nicely said, my last name is Riam. So we were known as the Supremes. And the neighbors knew who it was after a while because who else would do such a thing? So all those darn Supremes, they struck again. So we had some pretty quirky things I've never heard of before or since. But I can tell you that even though I didn't always like the trickster part of it or being punished about sitting underneath or staying silent. And by the way, I think both of those rules about quiet must have been Mom's rules because she just needed a break from a noisy household. Okay, I can set some rules around the birthdays, at least it won't be quite so boisterous. But I can tell you that as an adult, no matter where I lived, where I went, every single year, I looked forward to that call from my parents, who are now a duo, the Supremes, calling up, singing happy birthday to me and hanging up. That was a treat. And I'm really glad I had such crazy and playful parents. The end.
It's very good.
Wow. Thank you so much. Now, Lori, did you ever have friends come over who didn't know these rules? They would be really baffled, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Most of this was family stuff. We did have friends over for games, and that was a different story where we had games that I haven't played other places either, and like tying an ankle to your balloon to your ankle and hopping around and having other kids try to step on it, and you were supposed to step on theirs.
Yeah.
And it's like all you get was a bruised ankle, right?
Yeah.
And some other kind of strange games that I've never seen played otherwise. So they were familiar with some of our quirks, yes.
Those trick birthday candles were mentioned in the news. because it was a comparison. Apparently, when Tesla cars catch on fire, the poor fire department is trying to put them out, and then they burst back into flames over and over
Oh.
again. They're like those candles. So
Wow.
yeah, there's no putting them out once they start. They just
Magic
come.
Teslas.
Exactly. Well, thank you for such a delightful story, Lori. It's always a pleasure to see you on our stage. And next we have one of the co-chairs of our group. Please welcome to the stage, Meg Brown. So
Can you-
Meg, I'm gonna ask you to turn your camera on.
Brandon, I am having major problems with
Okay.
this. So I can't turn the camera on. Why don't you go on to the next person?
Okay.
And maybe at the break, I'll leave and come back and see if I can reset. I think I'm frozen, something
That's
like that.
usually
Sorry.
the best thing to do. That's exactly right.
So when we
Leave
come to
and
the
come
break,
back.
I'll do that. I apologize.
No, that's okay. It happens.
Okay.
And so maybe before our break, I'm going to just insert a little portion of the myth that I told this weekend. Epic Day, in the tradition of Catherine Fairley and Jeff Byers, who started this event. Every year there's a different epic, and this year it wasn't really an epic, it was Ovid's Metamorphosis. And so each teller had different parts, and I had a few choice ones. And one of the stories that I got to tell is actually, well, I won't say it's one of my favorites, but it's also told in the Odyssey. Demodocus, the bard at the land of the Phaeacians, regales Odysseus, and they don't know it's Odysseus. He's feasting with them with these tales of Venus and Mars, love and war. Now, of course, Venus loved Mars, which is interesting that the goddess of love was in love with the goddess of war. And Venus was actually married to the Vulcan, the god of fire and metallurgy. You know what Venus looked like, also named Aphrodite. She had heavy breasts, like large Tuscan melons. And of course, they were garlanded with sweet smelling blossoms, her hips mighty. And girding those hips was a belt of leather, which rocked to and fro as she paced back and forth with impatience in her palace that she shared with her husband Vulcan. What was she waiting for? What was she impatient about? She was waiting for her husband to leave, for frequently he went down to the island of Lemnos, where his beloved people, the Sintians, lived. It was they who had taught him the art of metallurgy. And it was Vulcan who had surpassed these masters in their own craft, so much so that he had become the god of fire and metal. Well, each time he left, Venus would give the sign, and her lover, her brother, War, Mars, would stridently enter the palace and walk right up to her and take her hand and lead her to the bed, Vulcan's bed, where they would practice all 53 kinds of lovemaking, reverse and otherwise, slapping, biting, scratching, all the ways known to rob immortals of their senses. And of course, each time when they were finished, they would lay side by side, fatigued in every member, the color of war's lips destroyed, love's garland of flowers smashed and mangled and soaked in their sweat, her leather belt, well, not where it should have been. and nobody noticed. Oh, but somebody sees everything. Why, it was Phoebus, the sun, who spied the lovers. And he told Vulcan of love's adulterous behavior. And Vulcan planned his revenge. He went into his smithy, and smoke began to billow from the windows. You could hear the sounds of hammering and clanging as he worked and worked feverishly. What was he making? Chains so finely wrought, they were invisible to both mortals and even the immortal eye, but so strong, why, those chains could hold even an immortal in place. And it was around his own bed that he poured those chains, so that the next time love summoned Mars, war, the minute they began their lovemaking, out sprouted the chains, doo-doo-doo-doo, pinning them to the bed. Vulcan returned triumphantly, and howling with rage, summoned all the gods and goddesses. Of course, the goddesses remained out of modesty in their palaces, but all the gods gathered round the bed and stood as witness to love's adulterous behavior, her betrayal of Vulcan. Vulcan began to demand Jove pay back the bride price that he had paid for love, for Venus. It was eventually Neptune who convinced Vulcan to release the two. War sped off immediately to Thrace, and love to Paphos, Cyprus Isle, where her graces began to bathe her, anoint her with oil, massage her limbs, comb and scent her hair, so that she could recompose herself. Once recomposed, she found she was pregnant, and everybody knew that the union of love and war was not Vulcan's child. The union of love and war was harmony. That's the end of that portion of the myth. So of course, there's many myths about Vulcan, and I told a few others. And I told one about Io too, who turns into a cow. Of course, many of these things have transformations at the heart of them. This particular one did not. But I think it would be a good time now to take our 5-minute break. I'll stop the recording and get a drink, use the restroom. You're welcome to leave your camera on. I know that Vina will probably be hanging around to chat. Vina, is that true? I don't know. But we'll resume at about, we'll say, how about at 7:55 or so. And we'll have this month's question. We'll introduce ourselves, and then we have some more stories. If you are interested in telling, please let Katie know, or just put something in the chat and we can all see it. And then there will certainly be time for you to tell. All right, so let's take our little break. I'm gonna go grab a mug of hot tea, and I'll be back soon. I'll see you all soon.
Hi, Vina.
Well, hello, Katie.
Thank you for your note. That was very nice. I appreciated that.
Oh, yeah, that was so nice.
Zoom the recorder. There we go. Welcome back. October Do Tell Story Swap. And now is the time when we introduce ourselves, and usually there's a little prompt. During the break, I heard a lot of people catching up. And it's just going to be so nice when we can all be in person again, because, you know, as we get our snacks and our drinks, that's something we did at our stop, or our swap, was to check in with people. And I know we all miss that. So it was nice to hear some updates and just chat informally. So our prompt this this month is a scary one, and I don't know if Vina wants to start out or not, but the prompt is: have you ever seen a ghost? It invites a story, but we have to try to be lean because you know, we're limited a little bit by time. It's hard to say that to a room full of storytellers. But I'll begin, and I'm Brandon, and I'm a high school teacher in Santa Rosa, and I've been coming to the swap for a little more than 5 years, I think. I do think I have seen a ghost. And I used to live in the middle of a rice field in Bali. I lived there for 7 years. And I taught at night from 5 p.m. till about 10:30. And so I would get home very late. My house was 5 kilometers from the college. And one night I was washing my face, and when I stood up, standing next to me was an old man. I hadn't heard him come in. There had been people who just walked right in my house before, so that wasn't totally out of the ordinary, but it was midnight, and he was dressed in very formal clothes with gold threads, and on his back he had a sword, which they call a kris in Bali. And I tried communicating with him in Indonesian, and he would answer, but he was speaking a language I had never heard before. And I recognized Balinese, and it wasn't Balinese either. Turned out it was old Balinese, and some people call that Kawi, which is an older language. I kept asking him what I could do for him, and eventually, when I couldn't understand any of his answers, to my horror, I realized that his feet weren't touching the ground, and he was actually off the ground. And, you know, this chill went up my spine. And eventually he left, and he just floated very smoothly about a foot off the ground out the door. And I watched as he just went out into the rice field, into the water of the rice field, not on a path. And I was really disturbed. It might have been that night even. I didn't even wait till morning that I went and pounded on the neighbor's door, and I told them what I had seen. And they said, "Oh, that's the king, the ghost of the last king of Badum, who committed suicide when he was in jail. The Dutch had held him prisoner, and he had cut his own throat with a butter knife." That was his ghost, and he was frequently seen in the area, and everyone just accepted that, and that was his kingdom, and he mourned its loss to the Dutch colonial state. That was a little longer than I think it should be. It's hard to just say if you've seen a ghost. I mean, people are going to want to know. But I am going to pass it off to Vina, and let's see how long she goes.
You're going to time me, huh? Is that right? Well, I have never seen a ghost, and I haven't, I mean, besides doors opening mysteriously in the house, you know, occasionally, I'm not familiar with ghosts, but my dad who was not religious and not a believer in the supernatural at all, um, told us that in his, in his sleep, his sister, his half sister, had appeared to him without saying a word and then disappeared. And he knew that it meant that she had died. And in fact, she had died. And they got the news the next day that she had died. So that's the nearest. I mean, it's kind of like your story, Brandon, right? It's kind of like a true story about a ghost.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's that not knowing too that is so, you kind of just have to sit with that, and it's uneasy.
Yeah.
So let's hear from Ellie Shiva.
There I am. I'm Elisheva Hart and I live in Petaluma. And I don't remember actually seeing a ghost. I just have this talent, especially for a year and a half or 2 years, of sending postcards to people and then finding out they just died, but I didn't know they had just died. And family people and also friends or people, sometimes friends, somebody I just knew from a long time ago. So that was my little ghost catching phenomenon.
Yeah, there's some kind of connection, right?
Yeah.
It's more than a coincidence, I believe.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
strange.
Like, hi, dear Aunt so-and-so. I sent this picture of the rabbits because you love the picture of the rabbit. I never sent her anything in our lives before.
Yeah.
And my dad said, well, I told your oldest daughter that she had died. I expected she would pass on the information, but she hadn't. And I don't think she even knew who my aunt was anyway, because it was, distant relative,
Yeah.
distance in space too. Things like that. So that's it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Evelyn?
Okay. So I can't really say I've seen a ghost, but when I was like 12 or 13, my brother and his best friend decided to play a trick on me, which is we had this routine of watching, it was some spooky movie series of Chiller Dillers. There was some movie series that they always showed us a scary movie. And so what they had done is they had created kind of like a dummy that they stuck on a chair in the kitchen. And the scary part of the movie, then there's a commercial break and they said, oh, Evie, go get us some cookies. And I went in and there was this man sitting on a chair. Anyway, it worked. I was totally spooked. So anyway, that's it. That's the closest I've seen to a ghost.
Needless to say, you must have tossed the cookies.
Yeah. No, it worked good. I'll never forget that. They fooled me good. They did a good job.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. And let's see. Katie, you have your camera on.
Hi, Katie Mangan. I live in Santa Rosa, and short answer, no, I've never seen a ghost.
Ah, not even something roaming a British moor? No, I just thought you must have seen something, the moors of England or something.
But it's interesting, I am working on a story that I'll probably tell next month, and possibly ghosts in that. It's
Yay.
celebrating the Day of the Dead, so stay tuned.
Wonderful. And Beth?
Well, I guess I'm muted, unmuted. I'm out of
Yeah,
that.
you're
There's
good.
a thing. Okay. So anyway, no, I've not seen the kind of ghost that you're you've had in your life, but I have a very vivid memory of the tooth fairy. Now, we know that there's not really a tooth fairy, but I just was waiting. And I just was very sure that I saw the tooth fairy kind of come in through the closed door somehow and take the tooth and give me a dime. That was the going rate at the time. So you can tell how old I am. So that's about as close as I've come to something that is of another realm.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's some great stories, but I am an open to understanding that different realities, different things happen, and that the paranatural can definitely be real to people. So they're out there, those ghosts.
Yeah. That's really, and maybe you believed so much in it that your imagination I don't know. I mean, it's just so
Absolutely.
fascinating. Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating. So
Really.
I've never, not to say we continued the tooth fairy for quite a while. I don't know whether that's healthy or not unhealthy for a child to not know the truth.
A lot of our traditions are worth examining, I think. So let's hear from Genevieve.
Hi.
Hi.
Let's see. I've unmuted myself. Okay. I can't say I've seen a ghost per se. I've had some little brushes with light paranormal stuff. When we were in high school, we used to do light as a feather, where you can just take your hand like this and have 6 people lift someone up like that just by meditating that the person's light is a feather. And then one time I went to an overnight, a slumber party with a couple of friends, 4 of us in her bedroom. And she said, let's play hypnotizing. And we did hypnotize my friend. And she had been telling a story about having her go down a dark alley and being chased and going down some stairs. And she started breathing faster and faster. Her feet were moving as if she were running, and then she was going down the stairs. We got super upset because her whole body started getting as if she were panicked and running away from this vision or this person who's going to hurt her. And fortunately, we were able to snap her out of it. That was scary. And it was real. She was not faking it. Her heart was beating. I mean, she was getting sweaty. But the closer I got to the ghost is that I used to like to go to Grateful Dead concerts. And one time, not long after a Grateful Dead concert, I don't believe I was under the influence of any weed or anything, but who knows? It wasn't the same night. I was driving late at night and I was quite tired, and I kind of hit a sort of bump, so it kind of startled me. And I looked, my headlights were illuminating the road in front of me, and in what might have been crosswalk paint or something like that, there was, right in the middle of the road, the image of the Grateful Dead skull, but it was black and white. I mean, it wasn't red and blue. It was clear as possible. And I saw it kind of like rise up in front of me, and I saw it clear as could be on the road. I thought, and so I went home, and the next day I went to look for it, and it was gone. It wasn't there.
That is scary.
It was kind of cool.
Yeah, cool. And the hypnotizing is really
That was scary. That was very frightening.
Yeah.
It's extraordinarily powerful. The power of suggestion is incredible.
Yeah.
It is part of the reason why we have a lot of false convictions as well, the power of suggestion, but that's a different topic.
Right. Which is also scary.
Very.
So let's hear from Vicky. Hi, Vicky.
Hi there. All right. Unmute myself. I just did. Hi there. Actually, I did. A very good friend of mine, Bill, died, and unexpectedly. And he, interestingly enough, was somebody who had some very interesting experiences with a ghost. But anyway, about a month or 2 after he died, Terry and I were in bed, and about 5 o'clock in the morning, we hear this banging on the bedroom window, almost as though you had a can of loose change in a metal coffee can banging on the glass. And we jumped up and we looked out the window and there was nothing. And we're on the second floor and there's nothing there. There's no trees, there's no nothing. And that was the beginning of a very strange weekend where weird things would happen and weird sounds would happen. And anyway, by Sunday night, I was kind of, jumpy. And Terry and I were watching TV in the living room. We were in a condo, and there was this tremendous crash, like all of the pots and pans had fallen on the ground. And we jumped up and we went in, and nothing was there. There was nothing. So we went back and finished our TV show, and we got in bed later on, and all of a sudden it sounded like somebody had picked up the sofa and dropped it. And we could feel the floor shake. Boom! And so we got up and we turned on the lights and there was nothing. And so we went back to bed. And by this time I kind of had it. And we turned out the light and all is quiet. And then the alarm clock in the second bedroom goes off. And I turned on the light and I told Terry, you have got to go fix that. I am not going in that room. So she got up and she went and tried, and she couldn't get it to stop. And during that time, I sort of prayed to my two grandmothers who were tough cookies. And I told them what Bill looked like. And I said, now listen, he's a dear, sweet human being, but could you tell him to knock it off? And I just envisioned him and I envisioned them and their little schmattas going over to talk to him. And Terry came back to bed and we turned out the light. And literally in about 5 minutes, that horrible feeling dissipated and there was nothing. And it was gone. But weirdly, about a month or two later, we were in bed and I felt somebody rubbing my back and I thought, oh, that's sweet. She's rubbing my back. And I rolled over and she was snoring. It wasn't her. And then I realized that the direction of the hand had been overhead in an arch over my head, where of course the headboard was. It couldn't physically have happened. And I just felt so comforted. And then it dissipated and I never felt it again, but I know that was Bill. And so my mother confirmed it because she believes in ghosts. And she said, yeah, that was Bill. And I'll tell you why, because he was a switch hitter. He didn't know, he thought he was gay. He's a switch hitter and he was in love with you. And he came back to tell you that. I don't know, but regardless, there we have it.
Wow, that was a lot of stories. That was wonderful.
He was quite a guy.
Oh, goodness. Thank you so much, Vicki. And next we have Lori.
I am glad to say I haven't seen any ghosts that I know of, but I've got a really vivid imagination. I've heard a lot of things that have scared me. And of course, having older sisters, we had a basement like everybody in the Midwest, and we had about 12 wooden steps from, the kitchen area down to the basement. And during the day, the basement seemed fine. We actually played down there and there was the washer and dryer and there was stuff going on. But at night, it just seemed like this dungeon. And they had this way of telling me, I don't know how it happened, but somehow I get down the basement. Maybe mom would send me down to the fruit cellar to get a can of something that she had canned during the summertime for dinner. And my sisters would they'd be really alert to that. They'd slam the door and then and then they would turn off the light that lit the stairs because it was at the top of the stairs. They'd turn the switch off. So I'm down there in the dark and I was just like panicked and like wetting my pants, like, let me out. And they're like, the boogeyman's gonna get you. And like, I never saw a boogeyman, but just the fact that you knew that it existed and your imagination would make it worse than anything you might really see. I mean, that boogeyman was scary as heck. Just the idea of it was enough to freak me out. So that was probably the closest I came to the idea of ghosts. And of course, the monsters under the bed. I learned how to leap from further away onto the bed just in case something was under there ready to grab my ankle. And I'm sure I learned all this stuff from my older sisters. You know, that's what they're good for, right?
Right. Terrorizing you.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, Lori. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Thank you. And next we have Sharon. Hi, Sharon.
Short answer, no. But I have had some experience with translation where I was working on documents of early California settlers, and they corrected my translation and told me when I was wrong. And they didn't show up though. So that was kind of nice. It was not scary. It was just, you better get this. So this is what it says.
Wow. Where you had done some work and then you came back to it and found it had been.
And it was wrong. Yeah. No, they didn't rewrite it. They just told me,
That's
and then when I further on in the document, I found out that what they had said was the correct thing. So
it must have been important.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if it was, but it was.
It was important to
important
them.
to them.
Yeah. That is really cool. And you say you were translating it. Was it in an
it was in it was in Spanish.
Spanish. Okay.
Yeah. And I had got the whole idea wrong, but they fixed it. I had to go back and revise.
Let's see. Thank you, Sharon. And Meg, I'm going to have you and Mary.
Well, I'll start out. Yes, my short answer is no, I've never seen a ghost. But like Genevieve, when I was very impressionable, 15-year-old person, I got together with a bunch of friends and we were doing a seance. And I definitely felt a ghost, and I was not a happy person. It was like the end of any aspirations to ever have contact with the other world in that way. So I'll leave the other stories to my mother here.
Me?
Yes.
Well, no, I never saw a ghost. But from the time I was 8 until I was 12, we lived next door to a down-to-earth, practical, not fanciful farm wife. And she told me that when she was quite small, she had run up to her bedroom on the second floor, and there was a girl playing in her bedroom, which she was so astounded because how did the girl get there? So she ran back down and said to her mother, "Who is that girl playing in my bedroom?" And her mother said, "There's nobody in your bedroom." She said, "Yes, there is. I saw her." And so she described the girl to her mother, and her mother turned pale and said, "That's your older sister who died before you were ever born." And several years later, she had neurotic fever, and it was very painful. She was lying in bed at night. She couldn't sleep. She was in such pain, and she was crying. And this time, the girl, who had by this time become a teenager, appeared beside her bed and said, "Kate, what's the matter?" She said, "Oh, I hurt so badly." And the girl said, "I can fix that. Don't worry." and she waved her hand over Kate's body, and the pain went away and never came back.
Oh my God.
Are my two ghost stories.
That's a great story. Wow. And it sounds like the ghost was aging with the girl too, right? The ghost
sorry.
was getting older.
My hearing aid just died. I can't hear what he
Yeah.
says.
He says that sounded like your ghost was aging along with with Kate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's so fascinating.
There's lots of other Kate stories involving the supernatural.
Yeah.
Mysteries.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Katie, you need to help me. The order on the participants always changes, so I'm unaware of.
Yeah, I think we have everything unless Dave, is he still with us?
I don't see Dave anymore.
Yeah, so I think that
Okay.
yes, oh my God, he's disappeared.
Right.
He was a ghost.
We're all in a ghost story. Yes. My goodness.
Yeah, but maybe we could just, unless somebody missed it, that Sharon is telling at the genre series Spooky Stories, which is next Wednesday the 20th. So please tune into that.
It should be really good.
Yeah. And then on the SAC website is a program that Brandon was in, and it was a Aspire Education. There were 4 tellers. It was a very inspiring evening, and it was a fundraiser. So if you want to hear some good stories and also maybe donate to the cause if you feel like it, check that out. That's on the SAC website.
That was fun. Yeah, the tellers were teachers, and it raised money for a literacy program called Aspire in Oakland, actually.
And so it was called, we can look up Aspire, ASPIRE?
Yes, Aspire Education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a nice event. Very good. I know we have 2 tellers.
Brandon, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But I do want to make one more announcement.
good. Yeah.
I sent out an email, and I hope everybody caught it, to save the date for our celebration that's coming up next month. Yeah, on the 20th of November at 7 o'clock. We are going to be joining up once again with a Southern California storytelling group, South Coast Storytelling Guild. And so we're really excited. We're starting to work on it. We have the tellers. Katie's been working on that aspect. I'll be doing some more, promotion kind of things, just to put some bios up and let people know who is going to be telling. And we'll talk about it again, I guess, next month. But I wanted to let y'all know that we are doing it. And it was a really fun thing to do last year.
Yeah.
Having the opportunity to work with another storytelling group that, we've never met these people. We don't know who they are, but, they're good stories and good storytellers out there that Zoom has actually made possible, during this time. And I think it's really expanded the opportunities to get together with other groups and share stories and hear how they do things. And so I'm very excited about it. I know Katie is too. So just put the 20th on your calendar, and we'll be talking about it again soon.
Wonderful.
So thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Meg.
Mhm.
And we have 2 tellers who are on the list. And if we have another one, yes.
Let's ask Meg. Can we? I'm sorry, because Meg.
Yeah, now Meg.
Yeah, because you were first. Is that okay?
Sure. Yes.
And you're
I'm
already
sorry.
spotlit.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm sorry about that glitch on my computer. I don't know how computers can drive me crazy. So I'll try to take a deep breath and think about this story. This story, actually, I heard probably last year. I think Gay Varner told it, and I was so charmed that I wanted to find it and tell it myself. So I call it The Witch's Broom. And okay, so Minna, I'm sorry, Minna, what was her last name? Oh, Minna was a widow, and she lived in a nice little village on a nice little farm by herself. And she had a cow and some chickens and a garden. And she did very, very well, was very well liked in the village. Well, did you happen to know that witches' brooms actually wear out? Something I didn't know, but this story is about that because Minna was out in her garden one evening and she saw a figure dropping out of the sky and crashing into her garden. Well, she went to see what had happened and she saw a witch in her tall conical hat getting up from the garden and kind of staggering. And Minna felt sorry for her. So she took her into her house and put her into her bed, which was terribly battered up. And she felt that if she could rest, she would recover. And then Minna went and sat in her little chair by the fire and she spent the night there sleeping. Well, in the morning, the witch woke up and she got up out of the bed looking very healthy. And she walked past Minna without any saying anything. And she went to the garden and Minna could see her talking to someone. And pretty soon another figure came out of the sky and down into the garden. It was another witch on a broom. They talked for a while and then the two witches got on the second witch's broom and they flew off. Minna went out to the garden, and when she got there, she saw that the first witch's broom was still there. They had left it there. So she picked it up and looked at it. It was a pretty good broom, you know, it still had a lot of life in it, she felt. So she took it in the house and she put it in the broom closet with all the other brooms that she had, and she went about her chores. After a while, she heard a sound, tap, 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 and she thought, what is that? Tap, tap, tap. Oh, it was coming from the broom closet. So Minna went over to the broom closet and she opened it up, and who should come out but the witch's broom, and it started to sweep. Oh, it swept her house so clean. It was just spick and span. And then it went out and it swept up the yard. And then finally it kind of propped itself up on the door jamb, and Minna went and got it and put it back into her closet. Well, the next day, the same thing, tap, tap, tap. Minna went to the closet, out came the broom swept and her house, it swept the dooryard, it went down the lane towards the road, sweeping away. And Minna thought, this is very helpful. Maybe I can train the broom to do other things for me. And so over the next few weeks, she trained the broom, which was after all magic, and so it could do many, many things, trained the broom to go in and get the cow out of the field and bring it in at night, to put the chickens back into their house. And she even taught the broom to tap out a simple song on her old piano. And everything was quite well. Minna was very pleased. Well, her neighbor, Mr. Spivey, began to see something strange going on at Minna's, and he saw this broom and he thought, oh my goodness, this is a terrible thing. And he went to Minna's house and knocked on her door. Minna, he said, you have something evil in your house. You have that broom. That broom is behaving very unusual. It's evil and you need to get rid of it. But Minna said, no, this broom is very helpful. It's helping me do my chores. It's helping me to bring in the cow. It's a very good broom and I like it very much. I need to keep it. Oh, no, Mr. Spivey said, you must get rid of this broom because it is an evil thing. And he went off to his home. Well, a couple of days later, the broom was sweeping out the lane down to the road when along came Mr. Spivey's two sons and their little dog. And they saw the broom sweeping away, minding its own business. Oh, they knew an opportunity for getting into mischief if anyone did. And they started to tease the broom, pushing it and pulling it, throwing it up in the air. And the little dog, oh, he was going after the bristles on that broom and just tormenting it to very badly. And so the broom finally had had enough of that. And it knocked each of the boys hard upon the head, enough to raise a goosebump. And it took the little dog and it threw him all the way into the forest. And the boys ran back home to tell their father what had happened. Well, that night, Nina heard a knock on her door. Knock, knock, knock. When she opened it, there was Mr. Spivey, and he had brought several of his friends from the village to her house. And they had a load of wood, a post, and a big rope. Minna, you bring that evil broom out to us right now. We are going to get rid of it. It is not a good thing. You do that right now. Well, Minna looked at all those men who looked very angry, and she knew she really couldn't do anything. And so she said, all right, I will bring the broom out. And she went to the broom closet and she brought the broom and she gave it to the men. Well, the broom, she said, no, you be quiet, because the broom is sleeping and you don't want to wake it up. But if you just be quiet, it'll be okay. And so they did. They very quietly took the broom over to the stake. They wrapped the coils of rope around it until it was tightly tied. And then they lit the fire and they burnt that broom all up to ashes. Feeling very satisfied with themselves, the men went off to their homes and Minna closed the door. Well, after that, things really did return pretty much to normal around Minna's farm and Mr. Spivey's farm, and things were pretty calmed down. But one morning, there was a knock on the door, knock, 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 and it was Mr. Spivey. Oh, Minna, something terrible has happened. Why, last night, my boys were looking out the window and they saw this white shape that was circling the house right around where the woods come into the field. It was a white shape and it was circling our house. Did you see anything like that? But Minna said, no, I didn't see anything at all like that. It must have been just some mist coming up from the forest. So Mr. Spivey went back home. The next morning, knock, knock, knock. It was Mr. Spivey again at Minna's door. Minna, no, this is terrible. There's something very horrible going on, something very, very evil going on. Last night, I looked out the window and I saw this white shape and it was circling the house. Only now it was between the house and the forest. It was much closer. It's a very evil thing, Minna. You need to be careful. You need to be really on guard. But Minna said, well, Mr. Spivey, I haven't really seen anything along those lines. Nothing like that. So Mr. Spivey went back on home. Well, that night, Mr. Spivey was sitting in his chair and he had his blanket up to his chin and he was just waiting to see if anything would happen when he heard knock, knock, knock on his window. And he looked and then he heard knock, knock, knock on the door. And then again, knock, knock, knock on the next window. And he realized that something was circling his house and tapping at all the doors and tapping at all the windows. And he was so terrified. All he could do was pull his blanket all the way up to his chin and sit there and shiver through the night. And he got no sleep that night. Well, the next morning, Minna saw Mr. Spivey Mrs. Spivey and their 4 Spivey children and the little dog, which had been found in the wagon, piled with all of their possessions, coming down the road towards her house. And when they got to their house, Mr. Spivey came to Minna's door and said, "Minna, we are leaving. This evil thing, we just cannot stay here. And you must come with us. You cannot stay where there is such an evil thing that is terrorizing us. We are going to the next village where we will not have to deal with this, and you should come too." But Minna said, "No, I like it here. This is my home, and I think I'll be okay. So I'm sorry you're leaving, but I will be staying here, and I will be fine. Don't worry about me." And so Mr. Spivey and his family, they moved off to the next village. And Minna went about her business, bringing the cow in, putting the chickens to bed, fixing the dinner. And that evening, she had just fallen asleep beside the fire. And she had been listening to a simple tune played on her old piano. And she felt a gentle tap upon her shoulder. And she looked up and smiled at the broom, not a ghost at all, but still covered in the coat of white paint that she had given it. She said, Minna said, "You play so nicely." And the broom bowed, put a log on the fire, and all was well in Minna's house. And that's the story of the witch's broom.
That's wonderful. Oh my goodness. So had she substituted a different broom for them to burn? I think so. Yeah.
I think so too. I think she was a very clever woman who
Yeah.
knew her stuff. Yes, it's a
That's
great
beautiful.
little children's book. So if anybody has a kid in their lives, it's wonderful. Check it out from the library. It's fun.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Meg. And we have Vicki and Sharon, and we have about 19 minutes left. So let's see if we can do this. I think I'll have Vicki come up right away. There we go. Welcome, Vicki.
Okay, I'm going to keep it short. I've never done a scary story before, so this is my first. There was a beautiful house, probably the most beautiful in the neighborhood. All the heirloom pieces, all the antiques gleamed with polish. The crystal chandelier was gorgeous and sparkling. And at the middle of this house was the woman who took care of it. It was her house and it was beautiful. And she dusted and she polished and she filled up the vases that overflowed with flowers. And she kept everything immaculate, and it made her very tired, but she kept on, and it was so beautiful that after a while, the house began to get dominion over her. And pretty soon, as she was polishing the big silver tray, she loved to see her image reflected back. It started to disintegrate, that image. And it was as if layers of onion skin or wax paper came between her and the face, and it shrank farther and farther away. She put the tray back down and got about busying other things, which meant cleaning up and vacuuming, but the rug came up in a big hump, just enough to trip her so that she fell. Well, that's not right. She started to feel that the house was maybe watching her. And so then she noticed, while she was lying on the floor, looking up at the chandelier, that it was dusty. So she went and got a chair and put it under the chandelier and was polishing every one. And when she had finished, one of the legs gave way and she went flying. Well, bruised and exhausted, she put the chair away and sank herself down on the sofa. And the big multicolored throw pillows with their sleek satin covers and their cold tassels came and crowded around her, claustrophobic, clinging to her so that she felt very, very small. And all of a sudden, the sofa seat cushions opened up and a great black maw appeared, full of used pens and old cookie crumbs and the occasional hairpin. And she fell right into the darkness, farther, 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 farther into the darkness. And the seat cushions fell back over her. The air flew up, creating an erratic arabesque of dust, which caused her philodendron plant to applaud disinterestedly with its fat leaves. And it caused all the little crystals in the chandelier to titter maliciously among themselves. And then suddenly out of the heating vent, a death rattle and a hawking and an exhale of stale breath. Silence, absolute silence, except for maybe the slight shh of a leaf falling from a plant. Nothing happened for weeks and weeks it sat. And more leaves fell from plants being strangled by dead, dry earth. And flies lined up on the sunny windowsills. And in the corners, little tiny spiders spun ghostly, sticky gray, ghostly cotton candy. And the house sat still for weeks in a gray, somber, stale air. But outside, everything was just as it should be. And everybody was walking around and doing their errands and talking to people. And then somebody said, you know, have you seen the woman who used to live in that house? No, I used to see her at the market, but I don't anymore. And the more they talked about it, the more they realized they needed to go over and do some intervention. So they walked on over and they banged on the door and they pushed the doorbell and they looked in the windows and went, hello, hello, hello. And there was nothing, nothing. So they called the police, who came running up and they banged on the doors and they pushed on the bell and they looked in the windows and they went, hello, hello, nothing. So they broke down the door. And when they went in, they had to admit there was no sign of violence, no sign of struggle. Everything was as it should be, except for maybe a stench from where the flowers had dried out and a smothering hand of thick gray dust and terrible claustrophobic stench. But nothing was wrong. She clearly just must have left. So she got put on the list of missing people. And the house fell through the bureaucracy of the courts, down through the papers, through the magistrates, through everybody, until it landed in the very hands of a highly energetic and acquisitive distant relative who was thrilled. And he showed up at the house and he repapered and he repainted and he cleaned out and he cleaned up. And then he called his friend, the realtor, hello. And out she came and she drove a stake into the front yard with a big sign that said for sale. And then she set about staging it. But instead of gleaming, quietly beautiful heirloom pieces, mid-century modern. And she moved everything in sleek and cool, angular sofas and chairs in colors like astro orange and mid-Atlantic blue vinyl, slippery and sleek and cool, with a throw carefully pushed over the side of the sofa in warm sienna, knit sloppily of never warm nylon, and a square of pane glass, sharp and glittering, seemed to float over stiletto black legs. And then she had all the decorator magazines spread out like candies. And there it sat, sleek and smart, cold and calculating, slippery and evil, like a very, very smart gigolo or a high-class prostitute. And the furnishings waited for somebody to come in who had dreams they wanted fulfilled, who could fall deeply into a dream and say, this is my house. And the house, for its part, sat quietly with the icy patience of a predator, waiting, waiting for something living to make its life there. Happy Halloween.
Oh, Vicky. Wow, that was amazing. What a smorgasbord of language, too. I notice Genevieve selected tittering maliciously. All these little touches you do with your language are just so, and they all add up and make such a powerful presentation. And
Can you tell I hate cleaning house?
I was going to say, I find house cleaning to be quite terrifying on its own, and you managed to make it into a horror show. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vicky. And let's bring our last teller with a perfect 10 minutes left in our swap tonight, Sharon.
We don't have to if we don't,
No, it's perfect.
Up there. All right. I'm surprised that you survived that story. I thought that would do Brandon in. It's terribly scary. Well, this one's not scary at all, but the winter of 1936 was mighty cold, and Stubby Smith was feeling it. Stubby was not a tall man, not a fortunate one, and he had spent the last night sleeping on a sidewalk grate in the city with a refrigerator box for a cover. And he didn't want to do that again. So he was figuring in his clever mind that the smartest way to get a bed for tonight would be to get himself arrested. And that the best way to get himself arrested would be to go into an elegant restaurant and have a wonderful meal and then confess that he hadn't brought any money. So he went to the 76 station, into the men's room, slicked back his hair, washed his hands, made himself as presentable as possible, and headed for Le Chat Noir, the finest restaurant in town. But when he got to the door, he didn't even make a step in before the maitre d' pointed to the sign. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. And so, disappointed but not discouraged, Stubby headed on down to the Burger Barn, where he enjoyed a double cheeseburger, a lot of French fries, a chocolate milkshake, and a big piece of apple pie. And then said to the waiter, I don't have any money to pay for this. And the waiter went for the manager. And when the manager came out and Stubby repeated what he said, he said, I won't fight with you. Call the police. I'll go quietly. I'll stay right here. And the manager said, police? I don't want any police in this place. Look at this. We're full. Everybody would give the restaurant a bad reputation if the police were here. And I don't have time to deal with a half an hour of filling out reports. All I want from you is that you promise you'll never show your face here again. Now goodbye. Wow, Stubby thought. What does a person have to do to get arrested in this town? And then he saw the perfect idea. There was a lone woman looking into the plate glass window at the department store, and not half a block away from her was a beat cop. Perfect. So Stubby sneaks up behind her, throws his arm over her shoulder and says, "Hey, babe, you interested in a hot time tonight?" And to his horror, she turned around and smiled at him and said, "Sure, sweetie, are we going to your place?" He was terrified and ran away as fast as he could, and now he really was discouraged. He was past discouraged, he was desperate. He went into an alley, found a broken piece of brick, and headed for the jewelry store. When he made it to the jewelry store, he heaved that brick through the window, and sure enough, the alarm went right off, and he leaned against a light pole and waited for the police. It was only 5 minutes before he heard the sirens coming up the street, and a policeman jumped out and said, "Which way did he go? Which way did he go?" And Stubby said, "Who?" "Well, the guy that broke into the jewelry store." And Stubby said, "Did it ever occur to you that he might be standing right here in front of you?" And the policeman said, "Oh, sure, I can see that. Somebody throws something through the window, grabs who knows what else out of the jewelry store, and then stands there and waits for the police to arrive. How stupid do you think I am?" "Oh, I don't know," Stubby said, and he walked off. He had run entirely out of ideas, and as he walked, he didn't know what he would do next. And then he passed a little white clapboard church on the corner where the choir was practicing for Sunday. And he heard them singing, softly and tenderly, "Jesus is calling, calling for you to come home." And suddenly he remembered how he felt when he heard that music as a child. And he remembered the man that his mom wanted him to be. And he remembered so many good feelings, and he thought to himself, this is a very poor life that I'm living, and I'm stopping. That's the end of that right now. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to look for an honest job. I am a new man. And he no more than said it, than he felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. And a policeman's voice said, "What are you doing here?" And Stubby said, "Nothing, I'm doing nothing." And the policeman said, "Well, that'll get you 30 days for vagrancy. You're coming with me."
My goodness, Sharon, that was very funny. Yeah, and probably very true too, right? It's when we're trying to be good.
So one moment.
Oh, thank you for that. And let's call our tellers, Vicky with her story of that scary house, and Lori with her traditions, and Meg and Mary, and Ellie Shiva, who was our first teller with the song, the kind of ballad. Would you call that a ballad? And
About a mini ballot.
a mini, and yeah, that makes sense. And Beth, who told the story about the witch. And let's see, who else? We have Evelyn, who did the bugs past and present and future.
Yeah.
And do we have everybody, Meg and Vicky?
I think you do have everyone.
I
Yeah.
think so. And what a wonderful evening of stories it was. There was something really nice about, this crisp weather we're having right now, and to sit here with a mug of tea and enjoy stories. It was really kind of a nice feeling. And I hope we have another one next month in November. We have 2 events together because we're doing our celebration on November 20, and we're also going to have our regular swap on our second Tuesday. So I look forward to seeing everyone then, and it was just really wonderful to see you tonight. I hope you have a nice month.
Thanks for all the fun stories.
Yeah, thank you
Hope
all.
everybody can sleep well tonight.
I'm gonna think about that thing in the swamp. Oh, God.
Silly
That was-
Bo.
It's the house.
And the how, yeah,
Good story.
there's a lot.
Beware
to
of
think
pillows.
And the king that you saw, Brandon.
Oh,
That's the
God, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
my goodness. Yeah,
And Mary and that missing tail.
yeah, that was creepy. That was the thing in the swamp. Oof. Well, good night, everybody. Good night, Genevieve. Good
Thank
night,
you,
Lana.
Brandon.
Katie
Wonderful.
and-
Bye-bye.
Nag,
Good
thank
night.
you as always. Good night.
Good night.